Welcome everyone to the importance of native trees presented by John Zeiger of the New York Botanical Gardens. He's the manager of the Thain Family Forest. This program is presented in collaboration with Healthy Yards New Rochelle, as well as partner libraries Irvington Public Library and Yonkers Public Library. All of our libraries have tons of programs going on, so we're not going to get into details about that, but each of the representatives from the libraries will put our website in the chat and encourage you to visit our websites and online calendars to find out what else is going on. Just a couple of housekeeping rules, and then I'm going to turn the program over to my colleague from Healthy Yards New Rochelle. Just please stay muted throughout the presentation. At the end of the program, we will take questions. You can put them in the chat as we go. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Bob Finkelstein, who is the co-president of Healthy Yards New Rochelle and a great partner in putting together these wonderful programs. This is, I don't even know what we're up to in terms of how many things we've partnered on. So Bob, take it away.
6. Thank you, Lisa, and welcome everybody. Thank you also the New Rochelle Public Library and partner libraries for helping to make this evening's presentation possible. A little bit about us. Healthy Yards New Rochelle is a group of gardeners devoted to creating yards that are free of herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers that harm our environment. And we see gardening as a means to create a beautiful and healthy environment for humans, plants, insects, and wildlife. Our purpose is to provide information and encouragement for creating healthy and sustainable yards. And we welcome participants who are new to healthy gardening and, of course, experts. And as Lisa mentioned, our speaker this evening is John Zeiger, manager of the Thain Forest at the New York Botanical Garden. John has been in conservation work for over 10 years and has a master's in conservation biology. And he is going to discuss the importance of native trees and how you can incorporate them into your backyard, which I think is a great idea. Native trees are, of course, valuable for birds, insects, other wildlife, and let's not forget us too. Tremendously important for the health of our communities, keeping our ecosystems in balance and healthy. And if you haven't been to the New York Botanical Garden in a while, and even if you have, they offer a multitude of opportunities, and we encourage you to visit, learn, and support their efforts. And following John's remarks, Nick Soufis from the city of New Rochelle has a few comments about a tree inventory and community forestry management plan that the city has received a grant for. And part of that involves outreach and letting people know what's going on with the plan. At this time, I will turn our presentation over to John. And again, if you have questions, put them in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, we will have time to go through your questions. John, please.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the New Rochelle Public Library, to Healthy Yards New Rochelle, to the Yonkers Public Library and the Irvington Public Libraries for giving me this opportunity to talk about something that I really enjoy discussing with people, the importance of native trees. So my presentation is going to be on native trees in our neighborhoods. And I work as the manager of the Thain Family Forest, as Bob mentioned, at the New York Botanical Garden. Just to outline this presentation, I'm going to start by talking about why trees in general are important. And then I'm going to specifically talk about why native trees are important to our ecosystem. After that, I'm going to review some native trees that are appropriate for your backyards. And we can talk a little bit about how you can help native trees, both the threats that are facing our native trees and the solutions that you can be a part of implementing. A really quick introduction to myself. My background is in wildlife management and habitat restoration. I previously worked as the preserve manager of Westchester Land Trust, managing about 1,000 acres of mostly forest across Westchester and Putnam counties, For the last year, I've been managing the largest old growth forest in New York City, the Thain Family Forest, which I encourage everyone to visit. It's spectacular. And that is at the New York Botanical Garden in the Bronx. So to start, we have a gorgeous red oak. This is one of the biggest trees in the Thain Family Forest that you're looking at here. And to me, this highlights one of the main ways trees are important. They're important for fighting climate change. All of that wood in that old growth tree is sequestering carbon. The tree takes carbon into its tissues and stores that carbon, and that reduces the amount of CO2 that's in our atmosphere, especially when you think about trees on a larger scale. Trees in your backyard can actually fight climate change in another way as well. They can reduce your energy costs because if you plant a tree next to your house, it'll cool your house. And you won't have to spend as much money in the summer on air conditioning. And in the winter, the leaves will drop and it'll lose that cooling effect when you don't need it. Trees are important for food and shelter for wildlife. So that's that same red oak, one of the largest trees at the Thain Family Forest in the garden. As you can tell, looking into the canopy, there's a huge amount of habitat for wildlife. All those limbs, the cavities that form in the trunk, form habitat for wildlife. And trees also provide berries and acorns, and certain animals, certain insects eat the leaves, feeding the entire ecosystem. Trees are really important for reducing different kinds of pollution. Trees filter the air. So here's a pin oak tree in my neighborhood in Woodlawn in the North Bronx. And as different types of air pollution move through that tree, the air pollution that's in gas form can actually be taken up by the stomata, which are little holes in the leaves, and trapped in the leaves so that the air becomes cleaner as it passes through the tree. Little particles of pollution will actually stick to the leaves themselves. And dense trees can actually provide a lot of relief against particle pollution, especially when they're planted in areas around highways and things like that, where that are emitting a lot of particulate pollution. Trees clean the water. So when you don't have trees, you'll have a lot of runoff when you have heavy rainfall. When you have trees, you have more infiltration. The water will move slowly into the ground. And that slow infiltration into the soil allows plants to uptake some of those pollutants and microbial processes to break down many of those pollutants that otherwise would enter our water systems or potentially even our drinking water. Trees also reduce flooding and sedimentation by holding the banks of rivers together and preventing erosion. Trees are important because they give us sustainable natural resources. That's not to say that all logging is sustainable, but trees can be sustainably harvested. And I'm in a building that's made of wood. The photo is from my parents' fireplace, and they're burning wood for heat. You use wood for paper. There's plenty of different timber products, from baseball bats to tables, that we get from wood. And my favorite, when I have pancakes, I love maple syrup, which is a natural product from native trees in New York State. So sustainably managed forests can provide us with a lot of products that are important to our lives. And lastly, trees are really important for creating vibrant human communities. Trees are beautiful. Trees increase property values. If you plant a tree in your backyard, your house will be worth more. And in urban areas, trees reduce the urban heat island effect. That's the idea that because of all the hard surfaces, like concrete surfaces and asphalt, that we put in urban areas, these areas are hotter than a nearby rural area, for example. Trees cool down these urban areas because, one, they produce shade, but also they do something called evapotranspiration, which sounds complicated, but it's basically a tree sweating. They take up water in their roots and they release it from their leaves. And that release of water cools down areas around trees, even if you're not directly under the tree. So that's why a tree provides better cooling than, say, an umbrella, for example. And I just want to say that's my favorite photo of me and my son. I'm showing him trees in New Rochelle that I helped to plant, and he's learning a little bit about trees even before I think he really knows what he's learning. So trees are really important, and planting any tree is really important, but it's particularly important to plant native trees. I'm sure a lot of people on this talk are familiar with Doug Tallamy's work, but I'll go into this work a little bit for anyone who hasn't heard of him. He's an entomologist, and he did some really great work around how native trees support the entire food web. He looked at different leaves from native trees, and he found one that native trees support a lot more species diversity and also abundance of caterpillars and other insects than non-native trees. He also found that birds, because of that greater abundance and diversity, birds prefer to forage in native trees and will often avoid non-native trees. So on a larger landscape scale, what that means is if we're planting native trees, we're supporting the entire food web. And if you're planting non-native trees, they might have lots of other benefits, but you're not really supporting the ecosystem. It's not like you're doing something bad, but you're not building connections and supporting the ecosystem. And I like to also just go beyond that. Our native trees support the ecosystem greater than just birds. Our different mammals are evolved to eat the acorns and other berries from native trees. And even this guy here, this is a red eft. It's a juvenile stage of an eastern newt. I found this in Cortland. They live in the leaf litter and have evolved to live in the leaf litter of our native trees. So if you plant native trees and protect native trees, you're not just protecting trees, you're protecting the entire ecosystem. So I'm going to talk about some of the trees that I think are particularly good candidates to plant in your backyard. But one thing I always like to say, if you're going to plant one tree, plant an oak. This is my favorite tree, the white oak. It's one of the most common trees in the forest around here. So if you walk into a local forest, you're often going to see white oaks. These are a super tree. They live a very long time. And the way you tell it's a white oak is it has whitish bark. You can kind of see on the left. And then there's lobes, like all oaks, those kind of lobes on the leaves. And you know it's a white oak and not another oak because those lobes are curved. On, for example, a red oak, those lobes would come to points, but on a white oak, they're curved. And you can see there's a decent amount of variation on the leaves. The leaf to the left, there's very shallow lobes, and on the right, very deep lobes, but they're both the same species of tree. So I'm going to go a little bit more into why oaks, because oaks really are the best trees to plant. The number one thing that I think is great about oaks is they support more insects than any other type of tree. So that means more diversity of insects. There's about 500 species of caterpillars that live on our oaks, but also more abundance. You get more, not just more biodiversity of caterpillars, but per inch of leaf, you get a higher number of caterpillars. And a lot of people might think, well, if I'm planting it in my backyard, I don't want pests. But again, those pests are what supports the entire ecosystem. So if you want birds, you want caterpillars, because even birds that don't eat caterpillars when they're adults feed caterpillars to their children, their young when they're growing. Acorns are also a really important reason why oaks are important. Acorns support a huge variety of native species, everything from our native mice and squirrels and chipmunks to different birds like blue jays and turkeys to our larger animals if you live in a little bit more rural area like white-tailed deer or even black bear. Oaks are truly they're supporting the entire ecosystem. Oaks are very long-lived. There's an oak in Bedford, I think they call it the Bedford oak, that's a landmark in that town that I believe is several hundred years old. And oaks are also really resistant to drought, which makes them resistant to climate change. We've seen some really severe droughts, especially in 2022. And most of the trees I was seeing were getting yellow leaves in August and starting to die. But the oaks, because of their deep tap roots, were able to tap into water deep underground and thrive. Oaks are also declining in our region. So it's if you plant an oak, you're supporting a species that is not doing too well. And that's because while the big oaks are doing well, oaks are having trouble regenerating in our forests right now. So there's a lot of options for oaks. Just to say, if maybe you don't have a good site for a white oak, but maybe you have a good site for a pin oak. That's a tree that's often planted as a street tree because it's one of the toughest oaks out there. It can grow in a compacted urban lot. If you have a wet site, a swamp white oak or a willow oak would be a good candidate. If you have a typical yard where you want a fast-growing tree, you could plant a red oak, which is one of the more fast-growing oaks. If you have really rocky, poor soil, a chestnut oak would be a good tree to plant. And if you want a small shrub, there's a shrub oak called the bear oak that you can plant in your yard. Another tree that I really like is the sweet gum. This is a climate adapted species because we're at the very northern edge of its range. So as climate changes, I expect it to become better and better adapted to our area. And it's doing really well in the Thain Family Forest where I work. It's one of the most common trees we're getting in the understory regenerating. It's fast growing and it supports birds, squirrels, and chipmunks with these spiky gumballs that are full of seeds. If you've ever seen these spiky gumballs, that's really the only con of this tree is they can be a little bit annoying. The leaves of this tree are heart-shaped and it has a beautiful form as you can see it on this tree next to the Bronx River. Red maple is another excellent tree. It's one of our most resilient trees. I've seen red maples on tops of mountaintops in Maine and in swamps in Georgia, and it can pretty much handle anything in between. It's a beautiful tree in the fall with gorgeous red coverage, gorgeous red foliage, and supports a huge variety of wildlife. Another good option is the white pine, which is a majestic conifer. So it keeps its needles year round, and it's especially important for cover for wildlife in the winter when all the other trees lose their leaves. If you want to attract owls, this is the best tree for owls. It's also good for windbreaks if you want to keep your house a little bit warmer, from wind in the winter. And a lot of different species of caterpillars and other insects actually survive on white pines. Sassafras is one of my favorite trees, so I had to add this. It has 3 different types of leaves. It has simple leaves, what I call mittens, and what I call ghosts. You can see all the 3 types right there. Sassafras is, if you've ever had any Cajun food, there's a powder called filet powder that's used as a thickening in food, and that comes from the leaves of sassafras. It's a really fragrant tree with a lot of culinary uses, and that filet powder probably came from indigenous times. So it's been used probably for thousands of years. It's a very fragrant tree. It smells wonderful. It provides food for the yellow tiger swallowtail. If you ever saw that giant yellow butterfly in the summer, it's probably a tiger swallowtail. The caterpillars like to live on this plant, and it has berries that are great for birds. Also, it's not my favorite tree. The white oak's my favorite tree, but sassafras is my favorite tree to say the name of. I just love the word sassafras. My favorite shrub is the spice bush. This is one that would be great in your yard. It is a fragrant shrub. It has yellow flowers in the spring, and its fruits in the fall feed birds. It's really resilient. It'll grow in a wide variety of habitats and prefers a little bit wetter soil, but will grow in other soils as well. And there is a species of swallowtail, very similar to the yellow swallowtail, called the spice bush swallowtail, that, as you can tell, does not have a lot of different host plants that its caterpillars will live on, and this is the main one. So if you plant this plant, you could attract some beautiful butterflies to lay their eggs on the leaves. Here's a list of other good choices for your backyard. As I said before, oaks are the best option. If you plant one tree, plant an oak. But if you have some other reasons you want to plant another tree, might make sense. If you want really nice winter foliage, American holly might be your best bet. Or red osier dogwood, which has beautiful red, not beautiful red bark, and is a small shrub. Some other good ones for the winter would be a winterberry, which holds its berries throughout the winter. If you want one that has attractive bark, The river birch is one that I see planted in a lot of commercial landscaping because even the commercial landscapers think it's a gorgeous tree. The red cedar is a very slow growing but beautiful conifer that has berry that's with fragrant needles and berries that are loved by birds. Black cherry is our native cherry. It's always been here. It's indigenous to this area. It's a fast growing tree that is very common in our area and also has berries that are loved by birds. If you want really bright, beautiful spring color, the redbud would be the best bet. This is a small tree that has gorgeous pink flowers in the spring. Another good option is the Sweet Bay Magnolia, which is our only native magnolia and has beautiful, if you've ever seen a magnolia flower, you know what I mean. If you want fruit, we have a native fruit tree called the pawpaw. This tree, it grows about 30 feet tall and it has kind of custardy banana tasting fruits that are about 8 inches long. High bush blueberry. I don't know if you knew, but blueberry bushes are native to this area. If you have more acidic soil, our native blueberries will do very well in your yard and they taste delicious. A couple other good options for shrubs include the pagoda dogwood. This dogwood has really, it's called pagoda dogwood because it has whorls of twigs that kind of come in a plane. So it looks like a pagoda. It looks like a, almost like a level of a house. And then there's the one vine that I have on this list is Virginia creeper. It's a very common vine in our area, but it's just so packed with value for our ecosystems. It supports lots of caterpillars and it has clumps of berries in the fall that are incredible for birds. But our local trees are threatened. There's a lot of things hitting them right now. And I'm not sure if people knew, but there's our forests are under a lot of threat. So the biggest threat is climate change. Some of our trees, especially like sugar maples and eastern hemlock, are at the southern edge of their range. When we have really heavy droughts or high temperatures, I can see these two trees suffering. And as our temperatures get higher and higher, it's possible that these trees are going to move north. It's not necessarily a terrible thing because there are also trees that are going to move from the south to take up some of that space, like the sweet gum. Another threat to native trees is deer browse. Right now in a lot of the suburbs, if you walk into any forest, you'll see a lot of open area. It'll be really hard to find any trees between maybe 6 inches and 3 feet. And that's because the deer are kind of eating everything. It's like if you have a field that's overgrazed and it's starting to turn into dust, our forests are being overgrazed as well. And that's causing us to not have almost any tree regeneration in much of southern Westchester. It's even if this doesn't look like a bad issue now, imagine 100 years from now, if we don't have trees growing to replace the ones that fall, we could be in a really poor spot and we might not even have a forest anymore. So there's really concerning declines, but there are also solutions as you see these two youth putting up a deer fence in a clearing so that they can encourage new young trees to grow. One of the biggest threats to trees and all plants and animals is habitat degradation and fragmentation. This is a Google Maps screenshot of New Rochelle, and you can see there are patches of forest, like Glenwood Lake, where I've done some tree plantings in the past. But most of the area is urbanized or suburbanized. And that's not so bad. We need a place to live too. But think about as we're planting trees, perhaps we could be making some connections between those areas and in our backyards, helping to expand that habitat. Most people, when I bring up threats to native trees, they don't actually think of tree disease or pathogen as a big threat, but I actually often put it as my number one. My biggest worry right now with tree disease is a disease called beech leaf disease. American beech are a native tree that make up about 5 to 10% of our forest. And it's possible, this is a new disease that might wipe these trees out. Maybe 99% of these trees are going to die. So there is a lot of worry that some of these new diseases, most of them are from other parts of the world that our trees aren't exposed to, could really be affected by different disease. The last disease that really came through and wiped out our trees was emerald ash borer. And there's been a lot of diseases before that, everything from chestnut blight to Dutch elm disease to dogwood anthracnose to hemlock woolly adelgid that have knocked back different trees in our ecosystems. And lastly, one of the main threats to trees is introduced species. These are species from somewhere else that can come here and cause problems in the ecosystem. The biggest threat is from vines. Vines can kill mature trees, and I'm specifically referring to these introduced vines, two species in particular, porcelain berry and bittersweet. These two vines can kill mature trees, and if you're ever driving along the highway, you might see almost like green lumps because the trees are completely covered by vines. So those trees aren't doing great. And it's important that we get some of these vines under control and protect trees where we can. Invasive shrubs and trees are trees and shrubs from other parts of the world that can, they don't damage our mature trees, but what they'll do is they'll sometimes outcompete the young seedlings and saplings in the forest, so they're not able to grow into mature trees. So they're kind of a threat in the long term. The good thing is there's a lot that you can do to protect native trees. The first thing that I encourage everybody to do is to learn how to identify your native trees. If you learn about 15 species, there's not that much diversity in our region of common trees. If you learn about 15 species, you could probably walk into almost any forest and have a sense about what kind of community you're walking into. It's also important to learn how trees support our ecosystems, which is what you're doing right now. So you really are making that first step. I think the next step is to plant trees in your yard. And again, if you plant one tree, it's worth making it known. I encourage everybody on top of that to volunteer because there's a lot of local organizations that are doing good work, but don't really have enough capacity to do everything that needs to be done. This is a group of volunteers in Hastings that I was working with that came out for an event to protect basically young trees from deer by setting up a deer fence. So they're setting up a deer fence in a stand of trees that are dying from disease. And lastly, it's important as well to take larger actions that can protect forest habitat, like getting involved in politics, calling a representative's office and pushing for larger solutions that can protect our native trees. So to the first threat, climate change. How can you fight climate change? Well, first, you can do individual things to reduce your carbon footprint, like taking the Metro North or the Beeline bus instead of driving. You can reduce any unnecessary consumption, which could actually twofold help trees because you're not using as much wood products and also because you're going to be creating less climate impacts. But it's important that we also think about the larger scale solutions, which means fighting for political solutions. So fighting for renewable energy. There's the idea of a Green New Deal and protesting if there's politicians that are trying to make climate change worse. So how can you help reduce habitat destruction? So I know when you see that map, you're like, there's nothing I can do. Well, actually there is. So all of those little yards that were between the main patches of habitat could act as habitat as well. This is actually my brother David planting a pawpaw tree. And when you plant a tree in your yard, what that's doing is you're making a little bit of a connection. And if enough of your neighbors do the same thing, you can create corridors that wildlife can use to almost create corridors between those habitat patches. And that's not just going to help the wildlife. That'll actually help the trees because the trees often depend on wildlife almost as much as the wildlife depend on the trees because trees need healthy populations of pollinators to thrive. They need healthy populations of species that will spread their seeds so that they can continue to exist. And if those small patches are completely isolated, the trees in them might die out. So not just planting trees then in your own yard, but maybe convincing your neighbors to plant their native trees in their yards as well. And I always encourage everyone to get involved because there's a lot of local organizations planting trees that need help. And then reducing habitat destruction is not just about planting trees. It's also about protecting the trees that we have. So we have a lot of native forest in Westchester still, and we can make sure that that is protected. When we do develop areas, we can try to cluster that development so it removes as few trees as possible. And we can try to focus growth instead on urban areas rather than trying to expand into areas that are currently forested. So with pathogens, it seems like there's nothing you can do, but there is. Um, Talking about emerald ash borer, that's the disease that has wiped out our ash trees. About 99% of our ash trees have died in Westchester County. But the incredible thing is, 1% have survived. And there's actually a group, the Monitoring and Managing Ash group, which calls itself MAMA, which my son, by the way, would love this acronym because that's all he says. The Monitoring and Managing Ash group, what they do is they get people together to learn how to identify that 1% that's still there. And they're trying to propagate those trees so they could bring resistant ash back onto the landscape. There's also opportunities to fight beech leaf disease. There's a group of land managers in the region that I've been coordinating for a couple years called the Beech Leaf Disease Coalition. And the goal of this group is that we can't save the beech because we don't have a solution to save the beech from beech leaf disease yet, but we can save the forest. And what I mean by that is in these areas where the deer browse is really high, instead of letting, as the beech trees die in the canopy, instead of letting the deer come in and eat all the young trees that would want to grow with all that new sunlight, we can fence those areas and allow new trees to grow so that a new forest grows to replace the old forest. And a lot of that is with deer fencing. How can you protect trees from invasive species or introduced species? First, don't plant introduced species. There's plenty of great natives like spicebush that you could plant instead of maybe a burning bush, which is introduced and invasive. You can help remove invasives, especially vines, from natural areas. And I want to give a big shout out to Bob Del Toro. If anybody here has gone on one of Bob's vine cutter programs on the Bronx River Parkway, he's probably done more to remove vines and save trees than almost anyone in the county. And this is actually my wife, Christine, during COVID, which is why she's wearing a mask, cutting vines during one of Bob's programs to save a tree. So just to kind of end, I want to say that there are a lot of opportunities to be involved in protecting native trees. I work at New York Botanical Garden, and we have volunteer events that I run to plant trees. This fall, we have one event on Wednesday, October 7th, and that's a member event. So you have to be a member of NYBG, and I highly encourage you to be a member. It's the New York Botanical Garden is a tremendous institution, and I do not think you will regret it. We also do have a public volunteer day on Saturday, October 26th, and that's going to be 2 sessions, so morning and afternoon session. And both of those events will involve planting trees in and around an old growth forest, and we'll be planting trees in areas where the forest is declining due to some of these forest pathogens. So we're basically growing the new forest. And I also want to plug, because, so many of you, I assume, are from New Rochelle, that the Glenwood Lake Association, which is one of those patches of forest in that photo I showed before, they're doing a tree planting that I've been assisting with on Saturday, October 20th from 9 to 12. And the RSVP for the event, just send an email to the fglppresident@gmail.com. So I'm going to pass this over to Nick before we do questions. So I guess I'll stop sharing my screen, and Nick, you could show your slides.
Thank you, John. That was great. Give me 1 second. unfortunately, it looks like I need to quit and rejoin. So I don't know if maybe you want to field a couple questions while I just rejoin real quick.
Does anybody have any questions about native trees?
I believe we have some in the chat.
Can you possibly read them to me?
All right, I am going to see about starting the top here. Let's see. One moment. Thoughts on planting a dwarf chinkapin oak for a small yard?
I think that's a great idea. Chinkapin, I don't know the cultivar dwarf chinkapin, but I think that if it's a dwarf, it can't be too big. And I love chinkapin oaks. They're a great tree.
And from EE, we have a question. Should we cut the vines so that they are not attached to the roots and the ground soil will die? Some are too big to remove any other way. The
Mhm.
part in the tree dangles, but will hopefully slowly die.
So what I have done, and this was a very broad topic, so I wasn't able to necessarily. Oh, Nick might be taking over. Um, well, if he takes over, I'll stop talking.
No, I'll
But I
wait.
wasn't
Go
able
ahead.
to I wasn't able to get into as much detail as I might have, but the way I cut vines, and I encourage people to cut vines, is first you want to do it in the dormant season, because in the growing season it can actually hurt trees. Because if imagine if a leaf is shaded by a vine for several months, it gets used to shady conditions. If you suddenly cut the vine dies and it's full sun for that leaf, it's going to get scorched. So I recommend cutting vines in the dormant season, so during the winter months when leaves aren't on trees. And then I think you don't need to pull out the roots because sometimes that can even do more destruction than help. If you can get the roots, I don't always discourage it. It really depends on the situation. But I think in a lot of cases, it is fine to just, what I do is I cut at head height and then I cut at the ground. So there's like a 6 foot gap between where I cut the vine, so it can't just climb back the old dead stalk. Um, and just leave it on the ground, and that's often fine. It's incredible. In 5 minutes, you can save a 200-year-old tree from vines that otherwise would have been killed by them. And I also just want to say, if you go to any of Bob's events, you'll be a pro in no time. I'll pass this to you, Nick.
I'm going to jump in for 1 second because this is
Mhm.
great timing. We have a question from Jen. It says, doesn't New Rochelle City have a tree planting program for local streets? And do they only plant natives? Nick.
Nick, you're muted.
Oh, there we go. Now sorry about that. So to answer that question, oh, and now the slideshow is timed. Okay. To answer that question, we do have a street tree planting program, and that program, um, the list was recently updated where the trees that you can select are only native trees. So you can check that out. And once I present here after that, I'll drop the link in the chat where you can go find out more about that program and the other urban forestry initiatives that the city has underway. But so to take a step back, my name is Nick Sufis. I am grant specialist for the city of New Rochelle. I am born in the Bronx, raised in New Rochelle. Still a New Rochelle resident, and I was lucky enough, actually, John, to be an intern at the Thain Family Forest back in the day under Jessica Schuler, your predecessor, I believe. So it was a great time. So if anybody hasn't been to the Thain Family Forest, I highly recommend you go check it out. And there's a lot to see there, a lot of invasives, unfortunately, but a lot of great old growth trees as well and habitat. And it was a great summer that I had there, and it made me a lifelong member of the Botanical Garden as well. So I definitely recommend you join the Botanical Garden. There's so much to learn there, and so it's such a great resource that we're very lucky, I feel like, to have as New Yorkers here. Um, and particularly here in Rochelle, you can even hop on the train sometimes to just go there. So, anyways, that wasn't my pitch. So let me get back to it here. So right now, the city is pursuing a tree inventory and community forestry management plan. Uh, this is thanks in part to a New York State DEC grant. Sorry, I have the last slide up there for you. Um, so it's abbreviated as a UFC 1 grant. meaning that there is a 2 and there is a 3 that we could also go for afterwards. And so basically, this is the first step. And the goal of this first step is really to assess all the trees that are in the city right away. That's the 6 foot area in front of private property where the utility lines are typically, or the sidewalk and or sidewalk trees. And so the goal is to really identify them all, recognize if they have any risks and benefits associated with them, and then prioritize the various trees, which, we're thinking, estimating that we're going to have over 25,000 street trees here in the city. We'll know for sure by the end. And managing and prioritizing the management needs for those trees, and then as well as identifying 3,000 planting locations to help basically get at what John was talking about, all the benefits that trees provide us and helping to expand that across the city, and in particularly those areas of the city where there's a lack of tree canopy already. So there's basically 3 components to this initiative. That we have the inventory that we're planning to end by the end of the year, and then a forestry management plan that will follow shortly afterwards. We'll probably have that published by the second quarter 2025. And so, and a bunch of community engagement, of which this is part of it. And there will be more community engagement to follow, including an in-person event, just to shout it out real quick, in October. I think that we're targeting the October 20th. It's a Sunday, John. Sorry to call you out. I think the Glenwood Lake Association's event is actually on the 19th of October. That's Saturday, but we can sort that out afterwards. So just a bit more background on the inventory. There's 3 sections that of the city that will be pursued in these segments. So at first we is section 1, and as you can see here on the maps showing all the different data points of the street trees, our consultant ArborPro has accomplished a lot. And right now they're moving into the second section, and think that will be done within the next month or so. And then they'll move to the third section and wrap it up by December. And so there's a lot of ground to cover, but you've probably seen some of the videos on social media, as well as perhaps the ArborPro arborist in his safety vest out there on the street, taking his measurements, collecting the data points, and putting that into a system for us to track and to monitor going forward, and really leveraging this data both for like short-term management priorities, safety priorities, thinking about the trees that pose a risk to the public. And then also long-term, thinking about how this canopy or urban forestry canopy can be bolstered by the various actions that John was highlighting for all those reasons. Creating habitat, reducing heat island effect, creating a more attractive and inviting place to live. And so, if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to this email or give the DPW office a call. If you have any, specific concerns with trees in terms of fallen trees or, safety hazards, there's some other numbers there that you can reach out to that are good to keep on record. But that's basically it. There will be more information to follow, both in webinars, hoping maybe we can do another one with John and some other, leaders in this space in our community, thinking about Jess Schuler, maybe some others that John might know as well. And hoping, if you have any questions, please reach out, or even now, John, welcome to move into the general Q&A session. If anything comes up about the tree inventory, we can address it then.
All right, so I'm going to go through a couple more of the questions. Let me see. Teresa said she saw the trees at Glenwood Lake. So she helped me plant those, the ones that I had with my in the picture with my son. Someone planted a red bud, and I'm very happy about that. They're great trees. I answered the one about vines. Thoughts on shagbark hickory? Actually, I don't know why I didn't throw that in there. Shagbark hickory is a great tree, and I highly recommend that people plant it. I definitely recommend shagbark hickory. So I was correct that the Glenwood Lake event is on the 20th, but that 20th is a Sunday. So I was just wrong about the day of the week. But they also do have a Saturday volunteer event. as Mia Baudry noted as well. It's going to be the 19th and the 20th. Reach out to that email that I put in my slide, the fglppresident@gmail.com, if you're interested in RSVPing to that, and that will be at Glenwood Lake Park. I added the MAMA, Monitoring and Managing Ash Ash website to the chat. So if you're interested in getting involved in that project, that would be the place to look to start. If you also Google Monitoring and Managing Ash, I think it'll probably come up. And are some vines not a threat to trees and good for wildlife? That's an excellent question. Lots of our native vines are great for wildlife. The vine that I put into the list of plants that would woody plants that would be good for your yard is Virginia creeper. That's a vine that will grow as a ground cover, but it will also grow up trees. And I find it's particularly beautiful and does not hurt trees. In the fall, its leaves just turn like beautiful bright colors and bright red, and it has gorgeous berries that the birds love to eat. And its vines like that are not harmful to trees. Our native grapevine, which is a grape, it has grapes, is very common in forests and is generally not harmful to trees as well. And most of our native species, because they've evolved with our trees, they're not going to be harmful to trees. It's really the two invasive vines, which are porcelain berry and bittersweet. Porcelain berry kills trees by smothering them. It just covers all the surface so they don't get any sunlight, which trees need to photosynthesize. And bittersweet kills trees because it corkscrews around them. And then as the tree grows, it actually gets girdled. It tries to grow outward and it can't. And it's almost like it's being suffocated. It can't send water up to its tissues and it can't send sugars to its roots. Someone asked for a source for pawpaw trees. Some of the recommended places that I would look include Earth Tones, Native Nursery. But for something like pawpaws, you might be able to get that at Rosedale. Rosedale's a more commercial nursery, but does sell a lot of native plants. You can often get pawpaws at the native plant sale through the Westchester Native Plant Center, but that's only in the spring that they have that. And then there's also an effort by Linda Roletter called the Wild Woods Restoration Project. I feel like there's so many things going on. It's like I want to shout out everyone. But there's also a Wild Woods Restoration Project. It's a nonprofit that does a lot of propagation of native plants from local seed, and they often have plants that are available, although I don't know if they have pawpaw. I would say the best option is Earth Tones Nursery, which is a local Connecticut native plant nursery. And then someone said, Kathy said, are tree tubes effective for planting? Tree tubes are very effective. So if you're going to plant an area in your backyard has deer, deer regularly move through your backyard, you probably won't be able to get a tree to survive unless you protect it, because deer really like to eat young trees. And the two ways you can protect a young tree are with fencing. So you could either have a big fence or a small fence around that tree, or you could put up a tree tube. Tree tubes work best if trees are a little bit tall to start. So you want a tree that's maybe, at least 8 inches to a foot tall. It can't be like a tiny little seedling. And then you put down a stake, and then a tree tube can be zip tied to that stake. And that tree tube will protect the tree from deer browse until it's tall enough to escape deer browse. And then does New Rochelle, I think that one was answered about tree planting in New Rochelle. Can you plant an oak tree in a line of existing pine trees? So oak trees do need a lot of sun. But if you have a partially sunny area, they could probably do okay, but they're going to grow slower than they would under full sun. So they wouldn't necessarily die, but they'll grow much quicker under full sun. Then I have a comment that it's best to select straight species as much as possible rather than cultivars. And I actually was just talking to someone from Mount Cuba, which is a nature botanical garden / natural research site, I think in Delaware. And they do a lot of trial garden studies on how pollinators use different cultivars of native plants. And what this guy told me just today is exactly what you're saying. It's that the closer a cultivar is to a straight species, the closer it is to the wild species, the more pollinators are going to use it. So once you start making really weird and crazy cultivars, they might look beautiful, but they're not going to benefit the ecology as much. Um, and then, sorry, I completely lost it. I got a question. Japanese maples pop up all over the yard. Are they native? Japanese maples, unfortunately, are not native. They're native to Japan. But they're not very invasive, but they do sometimes pop up into the woods. Um, I live in a co-op along the Hudson River Trail train line. Which trees are great for high winds? I've read that evergreen trees can fall in high winds, and that is true. Pine trees can be very susceptible to high winds. I would say oaks are probably pretty good, but any tree can fall in high winds. You're going to do better with if it's really, really high winds. You're going to do better with smaller trees. But oaks, because they have deeper roots, they can, and also because unlike conifers, a lot of our high winds come during the fall when deciduous trees lose their leaves. The deciduous oaks with deep roots are probably going to do better. Um, we're at the northern edge of the range for giant river cane. Do you recommend it as a native alternative to non-native bamboo? I would love to see people planting giant river cane. I would say we're probably a little bit north of the northern edge of the range, but I don't necessarily think that's a problem. I've never seen it. I don't really know how it does in this area, but I think it would be a great experiment to plant it and see how it does. And I think with climate change, trees that are a little bit, we're at the very just north of their range, those kind of, well, it's not really a tree, but those kind of plants are going to do very well in our ecosystems here, maybe 50 years from now. How does New Rochelle and other cities interact with Westchester County? Since we have so I don't know, Nicholas, can you take that question on how New Rochelle and
Is
other
it in
cities
the chat? I'm
interact with
sorry.
West? Do you see the question?
How does New? Yep, I see it now. Give me 1 second. So, the city does interact with the county, but in terms of nature study woods, that is under the county's jurisdiction. So, they would be in charge of managing and removing any trees there. I have not been a part of conversations about dealing with any issues there, but you know, please email, and I'll put it here in the chat as well. Um, and then I can follow up after I touch base with those that might have more information at City Hall.
And then I have a question. Oak leaf hydrangea is a good vine. So oak leaf hydrangea, it's more of a shrub, I'd say, than a vine. I think it would be a fantastic plant. Like the river cane, we're a little bit north of its range, but that's kind of perfect with climate change. Um, and I have Nick, I have a question. Can you only request a tree if your street has a sidewalk or tree area?
I think you would need to have a proper planting site in front of your house. It doesn't necessarily need to have a sidewalk, but I think there would need to they would send somebody out to assess whether or not it's an appropriate site, and if there's power lines and other obstacles like that that might get in the way, they would take a look at that first before planting. I just posted in the chat the website that you can go to submit a form, a tree request form. And there's I'll put it's a different hyperlink on that page. So I'll put the tree request form hyperlink as well. And you can see the species that you are able to request. And after you put in that form, you'll get more information from the city forester who will come out and take a look.
And
Yeah, just
then
a quick comment. I think people should understand that their house or their property may have an easement where the city actually owns or gets to manage supposedly so many feet back from the street. Um, so you should at least be aware of your property lines and if there is a city easement. On my property, it goes back 11 feet, and there was a city tree that had to come out that was 9 feet from the street. The city took care of it. So be aware of your property lines. Also, that's something a lot of us don't tend to look at. Go
and
Yeah,
ahead.
then Nick, there's a question about a tree under, like planting a tree under power lines, what you would suggest. I would suggest a red bud. But do you have any thoughts?
So, um, my understanding is that you couldn't have a tree under power lines, but the power company will just trim it to keep it so it's where it's not touching the power line. So yes, any tree that is a shrub. My understanding is that the code actually prohibits having evergreens in the right of way. Um, but I don't know if you've driven around Rochelle. There's a lot of evergreens in the right of way. So um, just want to point that out.
And then I think there's a question about catalpa trees. This is a tree that's a little contentious as a native species. It's a species that is kind of native to kind of pretty far southwest of here. But there's definitely some people I would say who consider them native. There's some people that consider them non-native. I'm not sure exactly where I would place them, but I don't really consider them a problem, and they're a beautiful tree. So I wouldn't discourage anyone from planting a catalpa tree. That's all the questions that I saw. Are there any other questions?
And if you just want to unmute and ask, that's fine too. Getting some thank yous.
All right. Well, I mean, this was a lot of fun, and I love any opportunity to talk about trees. And I also just want to say again, there's a lot of people doing a lot of really good work in this space, and I wish I could have had time to really call them all out. But just there's a lot of really great work being done. And thank you to uh, Lisa and Bob and everyone from and Nick and everyone from the Irvington and Yonkers and New Rochelle public libraries and New Rochelle New Rochelle Healthy Yards for everything you're doing and for inviting me to give this talk.
Yes, thank you. And Lisa, when do you think the video would be ready for viewing?
Um, Probably by the end of the week, if not sooner. I just have to have my colleague just edit out the stuff from before the presentation started. So I will get it out to you, Bob, as soon as I have it. Also, another question was snuck in here. How do you safely keep trees from getting too tall?
I would plant a smaller tree. So something again like a red bud or like maybe a shad bush, for example, or a high bush blueberry or spice bush that doesn't grow as tall.
Yeah, our last newsletter, I put it in the chat from a couple weeks ago. We had a list of like 18 smaller native trees that hopefully don't get over 25 feet.
Yeah. The red bud
So
is the best one though. If you're gonna plant one that's actually no, the bare oak's the best one, but the red bud's the prettiest.
oh, they're
And
all
it'll look the best.
great. So if you'd like, email us at healthyyardsnr@gmail.com. It's in the chat, and we're happy to send you the newsletter. But there's a lot of great opportunities. Oaks are obviously the keystone, but they can get pretty darn tall. But do plant native trees and support the effort and support the libraries and the botanical garden and the city of New Rochelle. We really appreciate it. Thank you.